vaccinate or be struck by lightning. Be sensible, be reasonable, be level-headed. No one will argue with these well-worn words of advice. But what do they mean? If you believe that governments are not being transparent about the dangers of COVID vaccinations, are you being sensible? Or is it more reasonable to accept the opinion that these vaccinations work? Or is the person who seeks a totally free media, untrammeled by any legal social restrictions, and true to absolute free speech, any more reasonable or level-headed than the individual who says that unproven information likely to induce social panic should be legally censored or held back for a greater good? You see, we all operate within a cultural bubble, which is another way of saying that prevailing views and beliefs affect all of us. But formerly, cultural milieus were shaped over decades and centuries. Today, given the extraordinary influence of media coupled with instant communications, the capacity of very small but dedicated groups to manipulate media and our views to their advantage, our Western culture changes very quickly. For example, wokeness is practiced by a small group of mischievous or insecure people denying expression of divergent views. But a sensationalist media, hungry for a few standout sound bites to attract viewers, hence ratings, hence sponsorship, hence profits, gives the impression that it's the prevailing culture, if not appeal to our sense of progress. Ask yourself, do you belong to a significant part of society that believes that children should be free to decide their sexuality? You see, a newscaster might add the word significant when it might only be a few hundred oddballs out of a population of millions of people. But being the subject of a research treatise, it thereby gives it the notion of significance, albeit that it arises from an obscure university by an obscure researcher. It's no longer sufficient to be sensible, reasonable, and level-headed. One must also adopt and embed strong values. The times are calling on us to think carefully about what we believe in and commit deeply to. Do we believe that government should be fully transparent? Or do we believe that governments should protect us from ourselves? For example, should the government have the right to legislate against consenting sexual relations between adults and children? Or do we want to protect children from themselves? Or do we believe that the rights of Australian expats to return to their country offsets the dangers of importing COVID variants that we may not have sufficient defense to and endanger much larger numbers than the number of expats themselves? Or do we believe that it's important for media to provide proportionality in reporting? For example, the proportion of deaths from Astra Zeneca blood clots is 0.004% of population. But reporting that there were 64 deaths from blood clots is much more sensationalist and frightening than quoting 0.004%. Did you know the U.S. National Weather Service statistics informs us that an average of 270 Americans a year have been struck by lightning over the past decade? And since there are 330 million Americans, the odds of being hit are 1 in 1.2 million. The probability of blood clots following a COVID vaccine jab was roughly the same as being hit by lightning. It's no longer a matter of sensibility or cultural influence. It's now all about your beliefs. And you need to inform yourself well in order to adopt firm beliefs and maintain strength of conviction to resist the savage assaults by media and self-proclaimed, often contradictory, experts. For example, highly qualified epidemiologists around the world differ strongly as to the cause, nature, and dangers of COVID and its variants, and differ even more about how it is transmitted, what protective measures to adopt, and whether vaccination should be mandatory. And each of these experts are individuals who studied their fields for nearly a decade. So where does that leave you? Personally, I subscribe to the power of positive thinking while seeking a well-rounded picture of things, and then I choose to believe in God. For you, I suggest you go on a news fast. Do your own homework, rather than rely on the daily changing views of talking heads. Better still, relating to COVID, if you have a family doctor whom you know well and who truly cares about you personally, even if he or she is not an expert, listen to his or her advice. And if you have had your first jab and are still reading this blog, remember, lightning doesn't strike twice. Feel safe.